Hi, everybody. I'm Alan, and this is Grace Memorial Episcopal Church. I wanted to talk to you about a couple of aspects of what we call stewardship. Now, you may have heard that word before, but if you haven't, stewardship is a spiritual practice of care. Care for one another, care for our own selves and our resources, and probably most importantly, care for the entirety of God's creation. Our scripture tells us that God called humanity into being in order to care for the world in which we inhabited. That's an important aspect that travels with us through our entire story. In fact, we as faithful followers of God in our own contexts, we keep enacting that act of care for others. And it's not just those people who walk the road with us, but it is about caring for all of God's creation. We are embodying God's care for the world in the way that we care for our world, for the other humans that walk the journey with us, for our own faith communities, for our own families, for even ourselves. That word stewardship in English has this notion of care, of taking care to preserve resources, of taking care to make sure that those resources of ourselves and our families and our communities are extending the same care that God would for the world in which we inhabit. It is recreating, re-inhabiting, re-embodying that sense of God's care in our own daily lives. Now, in church context, when that word often comes up, it is often associated with something that we call a pledge campaign, or this time of the year when we turn our attention towards things like finances and resources as we make plans for upcoming years. How are we going to walk faithfully into that call to care for others in the next year or months or weeks or whatever the time frame is that we are looking at? Now, we at Grace have recently concluded a successful pledge campaign. We received pledges for the following year, which were almost the same amount as what we had received the year prior. But here's one interesting thing. We had even more pledges than we had in previous years. And I want to thank everybody that has sent in a pledge for the mission that comes out of this place and how we follow God faithfully here in the care of others. Everyone who has sent in a pledge, everyone who has contributed funds, and especially to those new pledgers, first-time pledgers, or those who are pledging for the first time in a while. Thank you so much. It helps us plan how we are going to move forward together. But the aspect of stewardship that I want to highlight right now for just a minute is something that we don't always think about because we often keep stewardship locked into that fall season of thinking about the future years. And so it focuses almost heavily on finances. I want to talk to you about what I think is one of the most important aspects of stewardship, and that is imagination. Imagining that our resources are not just going for the opportunity to perpetuate what we want, that our resources are not just for the sake of creating a church where we can worship, but they are in fact going out in ways that we cannot even begin to imagine. That when we pledge ourselves and our souls and our bodies and our resources and our community and our family to this mission of care, we are pooling ourselves, we are forming a community that then embodies God's care for the world. This is an important aspect because we don't always see the end result. This is not as if we are paying to receive something in return. This is not even giving in order that ministry be done the way that we want it to. This is about imagining that God has a future for us and for this world that might be different than it is now. This is fundamentally an act of hope. Stewardship and the ability to step into it with imagination is fundamentally an act of hope in this world. We give ourselves and we participate in this community. And we pledge our resources, we offer ourselves and our time and our skills. And what happens on the other end is that investment of ourselves is multiplied in ways that we cannot imagine, that we cannot script, that we cannot define in advance what that end result is going to be. So as we continue to steward our resources, as we continue to practice the faithful act of stewardship every single day, I pray that you will allow God to stir your imagination, to stir your hope, to fix your sights on what God hopes for us, and imagine that that's a future that we can walk to together. I hope to bring up some other aspects of stewardship throughout the year. That is one that I wanted to start with because I think it is so important and so overlooked. How do we imagine the world with God's eyes, with God's hopes, and God's dreams? How do we embody that act of care in the world with all that we have and follow where God leads? Thank you.